Hey guys, welcome back to IDP Plus Trends. I am Johnny. I'm one of your co-hosts. I'm back with my partner, as always, Steve at Average Joe's, AVG Joe's _FF. Right now, it is the week 2 of the preseason. We got a lot of information, a lot of games going on right now. It is Saturday, August 17th, about 10 o'clock at night. We got games rolling. We got a little taste of preseason week 2 we got to watch, but while these games finish up, we're going to come on and drop a pod. Talk about some players on the offensive and defensive side of the ball who have been injured, guys who in training camp have showed out and now have put their name on redraft maps. So you got a lot of drafts coming up. So what Steve's going to do is he's going to break down some offensive news. Then he's going to pass the ball back to me, and I'm going to break down with some IDP news. So Steve, you're on. How you doing tonight?
I'm good, man. Yeah, watched a lot of games so far today. I'm looking forward to my personal favorite, Dallas Cowboys tonight, playing against the Raiders. It's interesting because typically week 2 or week 3, I don't know, with the whole preseason change with the added game to the season, typically this is the week that you see a lot of starters play for at least a half. Some teams are not choosing any at all, which I thought was interesting. Like there are a few teams that just, no, we're not putting our starters in at all. They don't want to play the risk game. And you saw some players play a lot. Like I was actually surprised how much Caleb Williams played. Maybe it's just they just want to give him more reps. But he played a good portion of that game. In one game, I've been, you and I kind of talked about the Steelers. Watching some of that, you saw starters in there, but then again, some teams just choose not to. And I like a lot of it's injury, right? We're talking injuries right now. You got players dealing with a lot, even just during training camp. You got Jaylen Warren, who did get hurt in today's game, something that he's doubtful for. I do expect him to be there week 1, but it is something you got to monitor. JJ McCarthy, big one, right? Out for the season that the Minnesota Vikings had high hopes. There was still a rumbling of, Sam Darnold still being QB1. But that pretty much just put everything to rest now. Like that QB battle is done with. It's Sam Darnold's team at the moment, with JJ McCarthy being out for the year. And then you got injuries like Christian McCaffrey, Jahmyr Gibbs, like both of them are not going to play this preseason. They're both dealing with some soft tissues, injuries that are going on, something you've got to monitor. Those are things that tend to linger into the season and have a 20 to 30% re-injury risk. So, when you're doing your redrafts and you're thinking, especially these guys that are potential first round picks, something to put, in that afterthought. Then you got the receiving core, 4 big receivers that are essentially out for some time. You've got Hollywood Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, and Josh Downs, all expected to be out 4 to 6 weeks, which is huge news, especially with, Hollywood Brown and DeAndre Hopkins. Those are their wide receiver 1 for their team, essentially. So that opens up things like Treylon Burks still has an opportunity to possibly have a career, right? Ridley, and his value starts to increase a little bit. And of course, Worthy looks again great in preseason today. He had a nice little catch, made some big plays, obviously Rashee Rice. And then with Josh Downs, that just adds the ability for AD Mitchell to possibly surpass him on the depth chart. Like right now during training camp, the videos I've seen in the practices, AD Mitchell looks great. Looks explosive. I was always curious how, the Indianapolis Colts were going to play this. You got Pittman as the 1. Obviously, Josh Downs was going to be the 2, AD Mitchell the 3, and then now Pearson the 4. There's a good chance with Downs being out, and there's a possibility of building that rapport with Anthony Richardson. Maybe AD Mitchell becomes the wide receiver 2, and now his stock value just drastically increases for redraft and, of course, dynasty. And then Rondale Moore, I know a lot of people aren't going to be drafting him. He's not somebody a lot of people have concerns, but maybe if you're a deep league and you're a big Rondale Moore fan, he's out for the season. Does help Darnell Mooney. And realistically, both Mooney and Moore were fighting for that wide receiver 2 spot, opposite of Drake London for Atlanta. So their value might change. I always had high hopes for Mooney. I was a big fan of him in Chicago. He just didn't have really the consistency at quarterback play. He had the potential. He showed some big plays, and now you got a quarterback in Kirk Cousins. So maybe Mooney's stock starts to increase. Like these are things you think about when you start doing your redrafts and looking at it. Of course, there's some big battles. You got 2 teams that are really, I think, one is not saying it's a battle, but I think the Steelers are in a quarterback battle. You being a Pittsburgh fan, I'm not sure how you feel about it, but I think right now, I think Fields and Russell are still trying to get that quarterback 1. I mean, they're giving Russell the start, so he's kind of coming into it. And maybe it's me, but that offensive line is struggling to protect Russ, and he's more of a pocket passer than anything else. I think Fields actually would be the better play if you put him in the lineup because of the ability to escape out of the pocket. It means making plays tonight, just running around. I think he brings the excitement. I think he's going to be a ticket seller. I hate to say it, but I think he'd be the one who would be the ticket seller for that team. So I think that battle is secretly happening, and I would not be shocked if Justin Fields ends up being the QB1. Then you got the Raiders, which is the one I'm looking forward to tonight. I know O'Connell's like the expected starter, but he's struggling in camp right now, and it's something that they're keeping an eye on, which gives Gardner Minshew an opportunity to become the starter. Me personally, in the fantasy space, I would like Gardner Minshew to become the starter. I think he brings more value to Devontae Adams. I think he brings more value to Jacoby Myers, the two tight ends, and Mayer and Bowers. I just think his veteran experience, and let's give him credit, like Minshew's actually a pretty good quarterback. He's not amazing, but he's a pretty good quarterback. And I think he needs a team like this with the talent that he's got. I was looking at some stats. Trevor Lawrence, who just signed a big contract, who obviously kind of pushed Gardner Minshew out of Jacksonville. You put them side by side, their stats are very similar. Yet one who is a first round pick, he's got the big contract, is secure. Then you got Minshew who's fighting for a roster spot essentially as a starter. But they're both very similar in their stats. So I'm hoping Minshew wins this. I'm curious how they're going to play this out because again, they're definitely a big fight right there as far as the QB battle. Then you got some other position players. Again, another position to look for is the running backs for the Dallas Cowboys. Not sure how this can play out. I know a lot of people like Rico Dowdle. I think a lot of people are hoping Dowdle becomes the running back one. I think Dallas is going to force it onto Zeke. Zeke will be the red zone threat. He's the touchdown machine. I think they're going to utilize him. I do think this is going to be a true running back, by committee type of thing. I think Dowdle's there. I think even Freeman is going to have value. And then of any of them, I think Zeke's the only one that's probably worth anything when it comes to redraft because I expect him to probably have 8 to 10 touchdowns this season to kind of help have some value. And then the Bills wide receivers, that's another team I've been watching and trying to watch as much as I can of that team. They haven't been putting Josh Allen in, so it's kind of hard to really see how this wide receiver room really fills out. I'm watching my boy Keon Coleman, who I talk about continuously every time, but watching him, is he going to become the wide receiver one? Curtis Samuel, who I think has become a playmaker who has value. You still got Khallil Shakir, like Mac Hollins. Like there's a lot to kind of unfold and maybe they become like the Packers. Maybe they're a team that just there is no true wide receiver one, and that gives Josh Allen the freedom to kind of really throw to whoever is open, not being forced into focusing on that primary receiver like he had been always with Diggs being there. So that might be something that's actually going to help Josh Allen's game. I look at Love, from last year, Jordan Love struggled, and then bam, the last 8-9 games of the season, he turned it off. He just went crazy. And a lot of it is, I think, he just has the freedom to just throw who is open. He's not being forced to throw at anybody. He gets to play just carefree football. And I think maybe Josh Allen kind of needs it. So those are some big battles I'm expecting to really kind of see some clarity. Again, I wanted to see more starters play. I really wanted to kind of see where these things play out. I mean, a lot of people are starting to redraft. Drafts probably next weekend, the weekend after that. I actually had my first redraft this season today. So that was kind of fun. I got to kind of see what rankings are going on, what people are picking. So, I got to have some fun. I've got another one tomorrow as well. And then I've got, I think, one more redraft towards the end of the month. So we're getting into that draft season. And I wish I had gotten to see more. I want to see more starters play. I want to see how these camps are, filling out. And again, just watching football is always a great thing to see.
Yeah, for sure. And going back to your Pittsburgh question, man, after what we saw tonight, just how the Steelers cannot protect Russell Wilson, and I do agree with you. Like, you need a mobile quarterback out there. I wish it was Russell Wilson back in the Seattle days. Unfortunately, it's not. Hopefully the Steelers can start him. I like to give him the nod and see what he can do. Throw the ball deep to George Pickens and company, and hopefully they start out well, and that means he keeps his job, because if you're winning, you don't change the quarterback. But hey, if Steelers are 1-2, Just like with Kenny Pickett, they were chanting for his name. I'm sure it's going to happen again. I bet Justin Fields is definitely going to get his shot. Hopefully, if the Steelers are doing well, that means that it won't be for a while. But how they were looking tonight, not being able to protect him, yeah, it might be Justin Fields' season early on. So, hey, I'm fine with either one. I think they both have upside in their game, and I think the Steelers team in general is solid, better than they were last year, and looking forward to see how that goes into the regular season here. But you hit the nail on the head, man. We got redraft coming up in less than a week now. Some of you might already have had drafts, and this information might not be for draft wise. It might be for pickups and being onto those early waiver wire moves before the other people get wind of this. So I'm going to go into the defensive side of the ball here, but I just wanted to mention before we do, if you haven't checked out the website Trophy Smack to get your trophy, to get your draft board, highly recommend doing so. They're still running the promo. I know we got maybe a week or two left before drafts wrap up and the regular season starting, 3 weeks here. But check out Trophy Smack, get your trophy, get your draft board if you're having a live draft, and have some fun with it, man. That's most important here. We're here for the money, we're here for the pride, but have fun with it first and foremost, and get your Trophy Smack draft board. Absolutely. So moving into the defensive side, I got some news, some injuries, hitting everything from a little bit of different angles here. First, I'm going to talk about the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills, I just watched the game with the Steelers, man. Same game you were watching. And, if you were late to the party, if you were, aren't on Twitter every day looking up IDP news, you might have missed that Matt Milano tore his bicep, which is a big shame because I was expecting him to return to form and be a valued linebacker this year, but that is not the case. But it's okay because if you're going to get hurt, do it early, get it out the way and let me forget about you, Matt, for another year until next year. And we got some guys that are potentially going to walk into this situation and reap the benefits. I mean, right now, the front runner before tonight looked like Dorian Williams, the second-year player. He was obviously a part of the team last year as being a second-year player and did well at times. But my big question here is how much is Buffalo actually going to use the second linebacker? They only used the second linebacker last year for a total of 75% of snaps per game, which isn't super sexy. It's not Minnesota, who I'll get to later. Minnesota was actually 44% using the second linebacker, which was dead last in the league. So this is not exactly bottom barrel, but 75%. It's tough to make noise, get those tackles when you're only on the field for not even 3/4 of the game. So Dorian Williams is a front runner right now, but somebody who might be turning the page on him is Joe Andreessen. Joe Andreessen in this game that is still going on, he had, when I stopped watching, 11 total tackles, 7 solos, and 4 assists. Made some nice plays, stops on fourth down. Wrapped up Justin Fields. Even though he's so electric, he got in the backfield to get Justin Fields. So I think this might be right now, if you're going to do a draft the next couple of days, maybe tread lightly, maybe do your research, maybe avoid these guys until some week 1 rolls around, week 2, and see what consistency rolls up. But I think I'm going to give the advantage here to Joe Andreessen. I mean, he started as the first team, one of the first on the first team as the top 2 linebackers to start the game. And so I think just that even with Terrell Bernard being out. So that's a little caveat there. Him and Williams were out there. They both have a good shot here, but I'm going to take the upside. I think the guy has some Buffalo roots, rookie Joe Andreessen there. So big ups for him, for his game, for his fantasy prowess. Also for Greg Rousseau. Greg Rousseau had 2.5 sacks in this game tonight, this week 2 matchup versus Pittsburgh. And if I'm Buffalo, I'm just putting him in bubble wrap for the next couple weeks. And I really like Greg Rousseau this year. I think he had over 50 tackles last year, 7 or 8 sacks. So I think this is the year he puts it all together. And, there's a defensive lineman who I think is going in back end of drafts and not really a huge household name yet. Maybe that's some guy you take advantage of. So that's what's going on in Buffalo. Again, Milano's down, Dorian Williams and Joe Andreessen. We'll see what the jury's still out. We'll see who steps up there. But as of right now, I wouldn't be buying all the hype in Dorian Williams. I like Joe Andreessen a little bit more. But still 75% for the LB2 in that defense. So there is capped limited upside there. Moving into Atlanta signs Justin Simmons. Immediately, I would call him a top 30 defensive back in fantasy for IDP purposes. Justin Simmons is going to be a nice tandem out there with Jesse Bates. Maybe it hurts Jesse Bates' value a little bit. And I'm not somebody who's jumping through loops to get Jesse Bates. I think it's just too early. But when we look about a dependable player like Justin Simmons, who you can get later in drafts, even outside the top 35 right now, I think that's a great value. Maybe if you're drafting tomorrow, this week, it's not going to be a guy who's on people's front of their minds because he just got signed and he had some injuries the last couple of years in Denver, and but still a consistent player. Great playmaker, and I think that Justin Simmons is going to make some noise there with Jesse Bates, so I like him a lot. This obviously hurts Richie Grant's value. I don't believe he'll be a starter at this point. I could be wrong. Maybe familiarity. He was a starter last year next to Bates, so maybe he can still start, but I would not be drafting Richie Grant at this point. And the Falcons also do get Matt Judon too, and I'm a little bit torn on this one. I don't know that it really helps Judon's, his IDP game, his IDP potential. I think he was in a nice spot in New England, and there's heads or tails. There's two sides to make of this signing, but as of right now, he does not have a contract still, and that's what he's looking for. So we'll see what the rest of the preseason is for Judon, but I would not really boost him up rankings as of right now. I think he was kind of high as it was. So Matt Judon, still the player. We know who he is, in his mid 30s now, but I would not go ahead and, jump him in the rankings. I know that Atlanta needs somebody to rush the passer, but at the same time, who has Atlanta had that's done it well consistently? So that scares me a little bit there, but still news there and a name to be remembered, Matt Judon. As far as the Colts in Indianapolis, we had a little bit of a scare there. Somebody who I've been really high on this offseason, Julian Blackmon, who's still number 38 defensive back in Fantasy Pros. I definitely still think he's a value. We got a little bit scared because we didn't see him in the box so much the first week of preseason. We saw him really fall back into that free safety, position. And a lot of people were scared about that, myself included, but he got back in the box this week too. He got right, and it looks like Nick Cross might be the guy, playing deeper. And I think Julian Blackmon still, with the injuries he's had, the first year playing the position last year, I still think he's a value at 38 if you can get him that late. So again, defensive backs, punt them, get guys like Julian Blackmon, get guys like Justin Simmons later. For the Washington Commanders, a guy who I had mentioned last week, Steve, Frankie Luvu. This is the week one of the preseason. 3 out of his 4 snaps were rushing the quarterback. So going back to my point about I don't think that he's going to have the safe tackle floor he had last year. Week 1 supports that. Although this past week it was a 50-50 split of him being a off-ball linebacker and an edge rusher. So maybe, they kind of hesitated him into that off-ball linebacker and really just had him rush the quarterback, get reps at that. But I still am not really high on Frankie Luvu at all. He's maybe top 25 at this point in linebackers, and chase the tackles with the linebacker position. I definitely do think Luvu's tackles, even if the sacks go up or stay the same, I think the tackles dip. So that's definitely somebody who I'm still fading, still advising to fade. But we did see Jeremy Chinn in Washington, heavy box snap. So a lot of people think Dan Quinn coming in will help Jeremy Chinn, myself included. And I do think that Jeremy Chinn playing in the box is going to help his IDP value. So big ups for Jeremy Chinn there. Don't forget about him. Another guy who's a little bit slept on, but I wouldn't reach crazy for Chinn. You got to earn it a little bit too. Moving on to the Bengals. My boy Jordan Battle, man, he's highlighted red on my page here. His value's hurting. He wasn't on the field with the starters. Those nods went to Geno Stone and Vonn Bell, both guys who I guess by default get a little bit of up in their rankings. But again, Geno Stone, I'm absolutely not. I mentioned him last week. Absolutely not touching him in any leagues this year. Let somebody else go for the picks. Let somebody else go for the non-existent upside that I think is there. And I'm not a Geno Stone fan, but Vonn Bell might be somebody who, whether he has the job, the first week or the all 17 weeks, he might have some value at some point. Not somebody who I'm exactly ecstatic to have, but definitely a name to consider if you're in a deep defensive back league or if you want to punt a position. And I mean, Vonn Bell is somebody who we saw make tackles in his career, consistently. So I do like him. I respect him in that regard, but I wouldn't be so happy if I have him as my DB2 and I'm starting 2 defensive backs. I think I could do better. Moving on to Philadelphia. Right now, as it stands, Zach Bond is going to be next to Devin White at the linebacker position. A lot of people are, buying the Kool-Aid, buying the hype with him, saying like he's starting now, and I think he's going to have. He might start, but to me, Zach Bond is absolutely not a guy I'm drafting. Never been a tackler. always kind of a bigger guy nonetheless, and always kind of been a struggle to stay off the field, struggle to get in the game, and maybe there was reason for that. So I'm not going to drink the Kool-Aid on this one, even if he is a starter. As a matter of fact, I think a name we're going to be hearing later in the year, if you're in a dynasty league, probably pick him up right now, is Jeremiah Trotter. In the first week of the preseason, he had 5 tackles and a sack in that first game. Granted, he was on the second team with Nakobe Dean, somebody who I don't think needs considered, Nakobe Dean. But Jeremiah Trotter, nonetheless, I think this is, if you're in dynasty, definitely have him on your team. Don't let him go on free agents, and definitely somebody who I think we're going to be hearing a lot more of come the middle of the season, towards the end of the season. For the New York Giants, a lot of people are talking about Daniel Jones right now, how bad he's looking. But I'm going to talk some defense with you, and I'm looking at Micah McFadden. He was actually hurt about maybe 9 or 10 hours ago. He was carted off, which is a pretty common thing at this point in the preseason. It doesn't mean like it's a season-ending injury just because the cart was out there. Happens often in preseason, but it's not a good look for Micah McFadden, somebody who was already fighting for the first team snaps with Dyontae Johnson, who was a new name to me. Really didn't know much about him until this year, but Dyontae Johnson was looking like a starter. The first week of the preseason, they rolled him out next to Bobby O, and he had a nice game. He had 4 tackles and a sack against the Lions in week 1 of the preseason. He succumbed to a ankle injury himself, so he's considered week to week. He has not been back to practice yet. Probably won't be maybe till the end of the preseason, but this might be a guy who hurts Micah McFadden's value. Jury's still out. Who's going to start there? Micah McFadden, he did get the nod today. Maybe that was because Dyontae Johnson was hurt. Maybe because he is the LB2 in that defense. Jury's still out. I would not really be high on Micah McFadden at this point, especially now that he's hurt with that hip injury. Just as a third linebacker there, if both of these guys are not able to play week 1, then we look at a guy named Darius Mousau, who also played his collegiate. He played at 2 teams. He played for Hawaii and UCLA. Not somebody who I'm considering, drafting right now. But hey, if Dyontae Johnson and Mike McFadden are both hurt, somebody's going to step up next to Bobby O, and maybe there's some value there. Micah McFadden had nice value last year, and if he returns to the LB2 on that team, then I think he could be a nice deeper linebacker for somebody to roster in IDP. But let's see what's going on with those first 2 linebackers first before we touch anybody else in that linebacking core besides Bobby O, who's supposed to be a smash play. I think he played 100% of snaps last year. So Bobby O, definitely a top 5, redraft linebacker as it stands right now. Moving on to the Green Bay Packers, we saw Javon Bullard start next to McKinney at the safety position. So McKinney, if you missed the last episode, he's somebody who I'm not really picking, just too high on value, but Javon Bullard, he might be a guy who is a little bit not a household name, little discounted price right now, and rookies are hungry. So, we talk about there's a couple good defensive backs out there, safeties as rookies, but maybe Bullard is the guy to own. There's guys like Tyler Nubin, Cole Bishop, but those guys are dealing with injuries themselves and limited playing time. And Nubin, I don't think he recorded a tackle in today's game, so there's that too. So Javon Bullard, maybe the rookie to own next to McKinney. Maybe there's just too much talent next to him with the linebackers that I'll mention in a minute to have value. But Javon Bullard, I think he has huge upside. Don't forget about him. Nice value pick right there. On the linebacker side of the Green Bay defense, we got Isaiah McDuffie starting next to Quay Walker. Quay Walker, definitely we expect to start, but Isaiah McDuffie, a little bit of a surprise there. They drafted 2 linebackers. A lot of people thought that was for a reason, but also McDuffie knows this. I had mentioned before on a podcast, he knows his system. He only had a 5% missed tackle rate. Not somebody who's going to get at the quarterback much, not somebody making flashy plays, but that's not what I'm looking for in IDP. I'm looking for tackles, and McDuffie can rack them up. I want to say 5 or 6 games he had over double digits. So if he can get that nod and continue to get that nod into the regular season, I think he's definitely going to have value next to Quay Walker. And Quay Walker's had some injuries himself. A lot of questions on him. Huge upside, but a lot of questions. So there could be a time in this season where Isaiah McDuffie is the vet, the number 1 linebacker of that defense. So don't let that go unnoticed. I think he's really down in Yahoo rankings specifically right now. Moving to Carolina Panthers, Xavier Woods, I believe it was an ankle injury, some kind of lower body injury. He is out for multiple weeks which kind of reassures like Jordan Fuller's status. I mean, Xavier Woods, playing a lot of tackle heavy leagues. He really wasn't even owned. He was like an 8-point getter, and those, you good defensive back in those leagues get you double digits. And I just don't think Xavier Woods needed much attention, but maybe Nick Scott is a guy who steps up. Nick Scott was formerly of the Bengals. Again, a guy who also did not really do much with opportunities. He might have been in LA too, but I really haven't heard his name much. So even though Nick Scott might be the next guy up, I'm not really buying that. This actually reassures the standing of Jordan Fuller being a solid late round defensive back in my eyes. So big ups for Jordan Fuller. Stay healthy the rest of the preseason. Keep being a sleeper. The other guys there on that defensive backfield, don't worry about and don't need to be drafted. Moving into New England, the Patriots. Patriots lost Christian Barmore, who a lot of people had a lot of excitement about this year on the IDP side of the ball. Big defensive tackle and has a lot of potential. Well, he has blood clots, out indefinitely. Matt Judon has been traded to Atlanta. Maybe this just opens up the reins for Josh Uche, Anthony Jennings, and Keon White. And out of those three, I think Uche might get the first look, but Keon White to me is somebody who this is the guy with a really late price tag, high upside. I think he was a second-round pick. And Keon White being a guy to maneuver at multiple positions, I really think he's the biggest winner of this trade. So again, Matt Judon, we'll see what he is in Atlanta, but I think as far as the biggest winner there, I'm going to say it's Keon White. And if you're in a deep defensive line league, or if things get deep and you need somebody with high upside, you're not going to start week one and just see where it goes. I think Keon White might be your guy there. In Tennessee, we got Kenneth Murray wearing the green dot in the middle, which was kind of expected, right? And we got Jack Gibbons was the named starter next to him as it stands right now. So a little bit of a damper there for Cedric Gray. And I do think Kenneth Murray has some value. I think he should definitely, if you're in a 12-man, you start two linebackers and a flex, I think Kenneth Murray deserves to be on a team in those kind of leagues. But I don't think his upside is really that big, and he's had some injury concerns. Granted, a lot of people are thinking it's going to be a rough year in Tennessee. I think it might be better than most people think. So Kenneth Murray, I think, is a good spot. I don't think it's a horrible team where they're just going to get the ball run down their throat. But if I had to have any linebacker from this Tennessee Titans, it's absolutely going to be Kenneth Murray. I think that's common opinion at this point, and I think he has some upside. I think he's a solid tackle floor guy, and definitely somebody who I'm considering in my drafts. Moving on to Seattle Seahawks, man, this is a juicy one. So we had Jerome Baker. He's been out the first 2 weeks with a hamstring injury. And a lot of people have throw shade on Jerome Baker because he's, kind of signed to step up and be that Jordan Brooks kind of role. But has he ever been really a middle linebacker? That's a lot of people's questions. Number one, maybe they have Terrell Dodson play that position. Terrell Dodson is looking good, and he's in good standing with that defense. And actually, he was the only defensive player, I want to say, in week one who did not come off the field. But the biggest winner to me in this situation, if Jerome Baker doesn't make it back, I think it's Tyrice Knight. Tyrice Knight, the rookie, I believe he went to Texas Tech. He started next to Tyrell Dodson that first week. He only left the field on Tyrell Dodson was the only player to play every snap. Tyrice Knight only missed one snap, and it was on a third down. Maybe that's a sign on the wall, writing on the wall about how their defense is going to look. Maybe that second linebacker comes off the field on third downs. Maybe it was just to give him a breather. Who knows? We'll see. Stay tuned on that. So, but Tyrice Knight, again, he's got the nod, starting nod again in week 2 of the preseason. Tonight, the game's still going on, but I think his night's wrapped up. He had 4 solos and 4 assists, good for 8 combined tackles. And so to me, if you're playing almost every down, if Jerome Baker's out, into the preseason or into the regular season, or if Tyrice Knight gets an opportunity to start at some point this year, I think absolutely he's going to be a household name. He is somebody who, if you're in a best ball, I'm taking like back end pick. I definitely think he's going to have some kind of value. Maybe Baker can't stay healthy. Maybe he doesn't even make it healthy into week 1. So Tyrice Knight might get a shot there. Definitely keep that name on your mind. Do some research on Tyrice Knight, a guy who I really like, who I think is hungry for that Seahawks defense, who quite incidentally needs some playmakers there. They lost Bobby Wagner, they lost Jordan Brooks, so a lot of tackles for the taking there in Seattle. My hometown Steelers. I got two more teams to talk about. I won't save them for last, but the Steelers, man, versus that Buffalo game. We saw Peyton Wilson come out next to Elandon Roberts. They are splitting the LB2 role. I'm sorry, it was Patrick Queen, but Peyton Wilson started the game. But him and Elandon and Roberts, as far as snap shares, they kind of split that LB2 role. I really wish Elandon Roberts wasn't on this team. He was solid in New England, but I wish he was still there because it kind of throws a damper on what Peyton Wilson can do. Peyton Wilson had a nice game. He's had a nice preseason, a lot of glow about him, but he did leave with a concussion. So we'll see where that takes his status moving forward. I wouldn't really take Peyton Wilson in a redraft right now and start him right away, but I would not be surprised mid-season, early on, even if he gets the starting nod and does something with it. Again, the Steelers really have had a tough time in IDP making good for one solid linebacker. I really doubt it to be two, but I just see something in Peyton Wilson, man. I think there's a reason Pittsburgh took him, and maybe there's a reason why a lot of teams skipped over him. But I think Steelers do well with their rookie picks, and I wouldn't be surprised if Peyton Wilson, actually was on a lot of fantasy teams this year on IDP. And finally, we got the Vikings. We got Blake. Man, what a mess this is. We got Blake Cashman, who was supposed to take a back seat. We heard that Ivan Pace was going to wear the green dot. Then it came to week one of the preseason. Blake Cashman had the green dot. Ivan Pace was off the field on third downs. And this is just a mess right now. As it stands, I was doing some research for my redraft leagues coming up. And on Yahoo right now, I think Ivan Pace was like the number 8 projected linebacker based on points this year. And if he's going that high, at this point, I'm just out on him. I definitely love him. I think he's underrated and, he's hungry. Undrafted rookie last year was really good value, especially down the stretch. But, man, if we're going to get this kind of confusion, with Cashman and Ivan Pace, I'm really not going to favor either one of them. I'm not saying Blake Cashman should be, top 8 linebackers drafted off the board. If he's wearing the green dot, I don't think he was the type of player that Jordan Hicks was last year. Jordan Hicks is exceptional. I love him in Cleveland. But when it comes to Minnesota, man, we're talking about also, I'd mentioned their second linebacker in Minnesota only played 44% of snaps last year in Flores' defense. That was the lowest in the NFL. So I'm kind of out on both of these guys right now. Blake Cashman, I just don't think he'll stay healthy or keep the job. And Ivan Pace, if he's going as the top 8 linebacker off the board, I just can't pay that price with this uncertainty. So, one of them I assume will have a great year, if not both of them somehow. But it's just a muddy linebacker room right now, and I'm not really willing to wait to go there. So I'm avoiding these guys as it stands right now. Maybe next week is a different story. But, for August 17th on a Saturday night, what I've seen so far, I'm out. Dallas Turner did have a nice week 1 of the preseason. He got a sack on the first game he's ever played. Of course, that was with no Andrew Van Ginkel, no Jonathan Grenard, so take that with a little grain of salt. But I do think maybe if it's not Jared Verse, that it's going to be Dallas Turner being the best rookie defensive lineman off the board, for redraft. And I don't think that, this guy's going to be putting up crazy numbers or be a, DL1, but I definitely think Dallas Turner needs to be drafted, especially if you're in a deeper league. And I would not be surprised if he had a nice rookie year. So that's what's going on in Vikings for the Minnesota Vikings around the NFL. Steve, you got anything else? I'm done with my IDP rant here. You got anything to add on?
Yeah, I just want to talk about one, losing Matt Milano was huge. Him being out last season for Buffalo was a big deal, and then obviously not even when the season starts. So I've got Milano in a couple of my dynasty leagues. So it's kind of devastating to see that. I did Greg Rousseau. He destroyed your right tackle on one play in Pittsburgh. He actually manhandled him and Najee Harris. So he's one of my favorites going into this. I really want to talk about the Commanders because, again, coming from a team that had Dan Quinn as their coordinator, now as the head coach, he's doing a lot of what he did with Dallas. He's got, Luvu, kind of like the Micah Parsons 2.0, where he's treating him off ball, on the ball. He's playing the edge rush. He's playing, off ball. So I think they're trying to use his athleticism, and try to move him around. So very similar concept. And then on top of that, the whole, Jeremy Chin thing. We talked about Jeremy Chin a lot before. I think you and I both agree Jeremy Chin has the potential to be a really good IDP player, and he just has had issues coming from Carolina. Just didn't really gel. Now he's in a team that they're going to treat him like Donovan Wilson was for Dallas, where he is a safety but played a lot of linebacker in the box, which is going to potentially give him value because Donovan Wilson had some value in IDP. Not super strong, but enough that you're going to roster him. He's going to get you some points, maybe a couple double digits every once in a while. So I'm really curious how the Commanders are going to really play out this defense. Like I'm excited that they're still in the same division because I think Dallas knows that defense really well. So I think those are some easy wins. But as when it comes to just IDP, there were some good players that Dallas had that people rostered in their fantasy team. So something to keep an eye on. And then I want to just comment that Barmore situation going on in New England, that just sucks because I think Christian Barmore was awesome. I thought he was going to be a potential Pro Bowler. Like he showed so many good signs, and it's kind of sucks that you got to deal with that, and then you lose Judon. So it's like New England at this point is going to get the 101. That's my assumption. I don't think New England's going to be a team that's going to have any value. So not only do they draft Drake May, who isn't looking impressive. I mean, he's got moments, which give this kid some time. But now they're going to get the 101. It's like, well, crap, like they still got a top pick. And then the last thing I want to mention, I hate to say it, you talk about the Viking situation, linebacker. I was a huge Ivan Pace fan last season. I had him on a lot of my dynasty. I had him on one of my redrafts, and he just went off. And I was like, oh, I found something. And because nobody cared about him, I picked him up off waivers on every dynasty team. Sure. And then all of a sudden now this year, it's like, wait, are they not in love with Pace? Like, I understand his undersize is what really held him back, but it's like, dude, he was balling out after he had made some turnovers. He was all over the field, and now you're like second guess. I just feel like they're second kind of guessing this, and it's like now I'm like, well, kind of pissed off, to be honest. I'm like, I was feeling really good about all my Ivan Pace shares, and now it's like, well, maybe it's not going to happen that way. So it's kind of disappointing, but that's kind of what we're here for. We're talking about a lot of still uncertainty. Like none of what we're seeing is 100% guaranteed. We don't know everything these coaches are, they maybe just trying to play different players and seeing how they're reacting in real time and just kind of getting and adjusting. So maybe Pace being not there as the main linebacker, maybe it's for a reason. Maybe it's rest. Maybe it's something else. But, looking at this, we're just trying to kind of get ideas of what these teams are doing, kind of informing you, our audience, just to make sure that you guys are prepared. Because, again, your redrafts are happening. It might have already happened or it might be happening in the next week or two. So we're trying to clean up the mess, trying to make some clarity happen, try to figure things out, hopefully help you clear out some IDP and offense, fights and battles. And I will say this, I just watched a couple highlights real quick of the Raiders. Gardner Minshew started. So that might mean something. That might mean something. So I'm rooting for him. I'm hoping he's the guy, but it is something to watch again, when it comes to these games.
Yeah, good stuff, man. And like you said, I mean, Pace next week could be back wearing the green dot, and this is just on August 17th what the look is. But if he's going 8th off the board or on the rankings, I just too steep price to pay, and be level headed with your drafts, right? Don't take huge risks. Veteran players, the guys who what they're going to give you, stack those guys, take advantage of those guys, minimize your risk to like later, like Keon White, perfect risk later when you have all your defensive linemen. Say if you have like Christian Wilkins and Jonathan Cooper and you start 2 and you need a bench defensive lineman, now take your shot late on Keon White. So minimize the risk until later in the draft. And, because things can change real quick, whether it be injuries or changing of the guard, like I mentioned in New York there with McFadden and Dyontae Johnson. Things happen quick. So if you have any comments, questions, put them in the comment tag below, and we'll get back to you. And thank you for rocking with us. We will see you next week on IDP Plus Trends.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.